All right, hello everyone, it's Ferric, and welcome to another roundtable discussion with the KI devs. Now, this one was based on the gear system rework as of the spring 2022 update, and in it we discussed things like the new gear templates, how the new gear templates are designed, and it is also based off of the dev diary that was released a few days before the roundtable, so I highly recommend you check that out. Links for everything will be found down below. We also talked about the accessibility of gear, school identity, and we even got answers to specific questions like, for example, why the Fire Merciless Robe and Merciless Ring give lower damage than other schools, why Storm and Fire get lower accuracy on certain pieces of gear, and we also briefly touched on the new raids that were added to guilds. Also, as a bonus topic, we talked about the gold skeleton keys because a lot of people obviously are confused on how to get them, how the drop rates are lowered, and why they work the way they do. The whole roundtable went super well. We got a lot of answers to a lot of the questions, and I just want to give a huge shout out to the designers Cam, Artie, and Ratbeard, who took time out of their day to answer a lot of our questions on a lot of these new changes. And also shout out to Spark, who helped me get the roundtable set up. Very happy to have the opportunity to host one of these again. Obviously, earlier this year, I had the opportunity to host the Spellment roundtable, and I would also love to host future roundtables as well. They're just really, really fun to do, and I think we get a lot of great discussions out of them. Shout out to Emma as well for helping me moderate the chat. Obviously, in these roundtables, the chat can get a little crazy, and without Emma, I would not be able to focus on the stream while also keeping the chat clean and, you know, free of a lot of weird things. And also shout out to everyone that was able to make it to the stream, and also those that were there before that helped me with coming up with a lot of the ideas for the roundtable, because obviously I do have a lot of ideas on my own for discussion topics, things like that, but just getting community feedback is very, very important. Anyways, without further ado, here is the Wizard101 Gear System Rework Roundtable Discussion. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Wizard101 Gear System Roundtable Discussion with the Wizard101 devs. My name is Ferric, and joining me today will be Cam, Artie, Ratbeard, and Sparck. Basically, we're going to be talking about a lot of the changes that have happened to the gear system, how it currently works, future plans with it, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself. I'm Ferric, for those that don't know me. I do play Wizard101. I've been playing for quite a long time, and I currently make content on playing the game in a way where, you know, I basically have my Wizard101 on a budget series where I play through the game without spending any crowns, trying to like farm for everything. And I also have my main account where I kind of do the opposite of that and try to go for a lot of crazy Wizard101 challenges. But along with me, I have Cam, Artie, Ratbeard, and Sparck. If y'all want to introduce yourselves in that order, can go ahead and do that right now.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Cam. I'm a designer, and I'm also a player. I started this year at King's Isle, and I also stream on Faircourt on Twitch, and I wrote the most recent dev diary on gear and designed some stuff. Yeah. All right, Artie.
Yeah, I'm Artie Rogers, design director at King's Isle. I've been around King's Isle forever. Was here during launch and then came back and was working with Cam and Dom and Ratbeard and everybody on this gear review.
Are you done?
I forgot to pass the torch.
Yeah,
okay,
I didn't know if
Spark is next. I'm kidding. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm done. Go ahead.
I don't know if you're pausing for dramatic effect or not. I guess we're going in the order that they're listed on the screen as opposed to order of importance. So this is Ratbeard. I've been at King's Isle since 2010. I started on systems design on Pirate. I was the lead designer on Pirate 101. Did a stint in mobile, and then came back to the Wizard team as the lead here. So I am sort of the, I guess, the face of the design team. I try to stream in the mornings when I can. I am the official reworder of things, so I will be helping today to add some commentary to comments from Cam and Artie. I already took a hatchet to Cam's dev diary, so although he did write it, I chopped it up pretty good and made it more pretty.
Yeah,
We'll
I
teach
felt
Cam
like
how to write eventually. So
It was pretty.
I felt like my comments almost, or there were more words in my comments than in the dev diary. But no, it's good.
It was
It's
very
good.
concise.
Mark?
Hey everybody, so I'm Spark, Senior Community Manager at Kings Isle, and while I am not as, I don't have as much of a tenure as Artie and Ratbeard, tenure isn't everything, folks, I still have a bit of a spark about myself. That was probably the worst ever pun, but there it is for you all to enjoy for the rest of the show here. Thank you for having me on, Ferric. This is, really great roundtable. We sure had fun with that Spellman's one last time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we have to chat about today. I'll be kind of on the back burner here. I might pop in once in a while, but I am not a designer, and I don't know the details about all of the systems we're going to be talking about today that you all are eager to see. But I'll make sure I throw a laugh or two in there, or maybe cry. We'll see what happens. It'll be fun.
All right, happy to have you all here. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to come here and explain to us the burning questions we have about gear and other things as well. So, anyways, for the topics today, the topic overview for today, basically, gear design has changed numerous times throughout the game's existence, from the Waterworks, Tartarus, and Darkmoor era, where you pretty much had every stat on every piece of gear, to the Dragoon era, where different pieces played different roles and stats, to the most recent design overhaul with the 2022 spring update. So today we're going to be talking about things like gear templates, desirability, accessibility, school identity, dual school, and then, what we might also, if there's time, also, this is a little bit off topic, but have a discussion on the skeleton key changes that have come with the recent update as well. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into the first topic, the main topic, which is going to be
Gear.
Dun, dun,
gear.
dun.
Yes, gear.
Gear.
The first topic, which is going to be the gear templates, which is, the main part of this, how this new gear design works. So, as mentioned in the dev diary by Cam, the foundation for this gear rework is based on a new template system in which there are 3 different roles: offense, defense, and utility, with any template favoring one of the 3 roles as the primary role, a secondary role with less of that type of stat, and then a tertiary role with even less of that stat. Quote, offense includes stats like damage, pierce, and critical. Defense includes stats like resist, block, and health. And utility includes stats such as accuracy, power pip chance, and shadow pip rating, end quote. So with that, my first question is, within each role, are certain stats given more priority than other stats in that role? And how do you determine how much you are supposed to give? For example, within the offense role, how do you determine whether you give more pierce to a certain piece of gear, or more damage, or more critical?
I could start this one. So basically, with each combination of the 3 roles in the templates, it results in having 2 templates where they share the same primary stat. So there are 2 variations with, DPS 1 or damage 1. So we basically gave one pierce and the other damage to add more variety to the sets. I guess apart from the second and tertiary role. So that I guess just to make it more interesting.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm stepping in to do my job as official translator. Did that make sense to everybody? Basically what he's saying is that take a template that is designated as an offense template. There might be 2 variations of that same offense primary template, where one of them has higher pierce and the other one has higher damage, for example.
Yeah, and what we were doing is we looked at all the stats, and then we the entire team, Dom, Drew, Cam, everybody, and we ranked or gave them a weighting based on what we considered to be desirability. And then so each sort of primary role would have a couple of its top most desirable stats. So like damage would be damage and pierce, and tank would be or defense would be health and resist. And then in order to, because what we're doing is we want to give players meaningful choices to sort of have choose mix and match gear that would then suit their play style, which may be influenced by their school choices. And so you may want to favor pierce versus damage or something based on either the gems you have or the pet you have or kind of other decisions you're making with other pieces of gear. So we wanted to give some additional flexibility within a particular role dominance, is to give players a little bit more choices and differences.
Yeah, and I can actually see that here. So like on my screen, what I have is I have 2 boots right here, which I'm gonna assume that the primary stat for both these is damage, but you can see on one of them it gives more pierce, and the other one it gives more damage. So I feel like that's like probably a good example of what you're just talking about.
Right, and the crit is the same.
Yeah, and the crit is the same. So yeah. All right. So and then question number 2 is. This template covers every stat on every piece of gear except for item cards. So how are the item cards affected by the template at all? And if so, how?
So the item cards can be, so each stat is assigned to a role. With item cards, they can kind of belong to any of the 3 roles. So with your damage sets, you'll probably get a damage specific item card. Like you're just showing right now, the auras are more damage focused, and you might get a defense one or a utility one depending on the template.
I see. Yeah. So the Highlands, which is more of a defensive focus set, gets this the shield spell right here. Okay.
Right.
Well, I mean, like the Pirates Code, it's really more of guidelines than rules.
Yeah.
And oftentimes. So Cam sort of works on Cam and Artie sort of work on the back end, the spreadsheet that sort of drives the beating heart of this system, right? But Dominic is still, which is Stormbringer, is still kind of in charge of putting together the gear. And so he has a lot of leeway when it comes down to the item cards, occasionally too much leeway. But he has a lot of leeway with the item cards to sort of figure out what would make a particular set of gear that he's working on at this exact moment interesting to the players. And so for that kind of thing, he's not guided by just the templates, but he might also be guided by something like what's the meta in PvP, or more importantly, what's something that players might appreciate for a raid, right? Or something that we can get players interested in. So he has a lot of leeway there. And of course, just given the fact that we have so many spells in the game, there's an infinite number of variations of item cards that you can put on there, so which is cool.
Okay. All right. Now the third question is once again related to templates. So since the spring update, we've seen many different sets with this new template system, which include the Merciless set from Lemuria, the Highland set from the Unforgiven Dead Gauntlet, the Spiral Villain set from the Villain's Horde pack. And with the release of raids, we have 2 additional sets, one being the Nullity set and the other being the Void set. Would you be able to go over the role templates for each set, basically what the priority is for each set?
Sure, I can do that. So the Merciless set is the same template as the Chrysalis and Dragonspire gear. Those were I think our first ones that we put out.
Yeah.
And the difference is the level. But so that's your damage 1, defense, or I should offense 1, defense 2, and then utility 3. As you pointed out in your video. And then the Highlands is your tank 1, your defense 1, and then utility 2. DPS 3. And then Villain's Horde was utility 1, damage 2, and defense 3. The Professor's Horde pack came out, which was with the updated gear. That was the same as the Merciless gear, with a different secondary school, which we could talk about later, I believe. And then the Nullity set is the full glass set, which is damage 1, utility 2, defense 3. And then the Void set would be Utility 1, Tank 2, Damage 3. So I believe amongst all of those that have been released, I think that's all of them, or maybe we're missing one or two templates, but
I fell behind in my transcription duties there in the
yeah.
but yeah, in our dev notes we call it offense, defense, and utility. Behind the scenes we call it DPS, tank, and utility. So
right.
My apologies. That's how
I was going back and forth. I realized.
Yeah. Well, because it is DPS is kind of jargony, but I tend to think that for anybody who's interested in gear, that's how they probably think of it anyway. It's a little bit jargony, but I guess the thing I'd like to ask, if I can insert my own question here for Cam to go over, what exactly does it mean if a particular role is number 3? Like, what does DPS 3 mean in terms of the appearance of particular stats on that template?
Right. So it being 3 means two things. One is there's less of them on the template. I mean, like on the piece entirely. Like the Merciless hat that Ferric's looking at now has no power pip on it. So sometimes it's completely gone, but if it is on there, it's going to be a lot less than other pieces. So it's, I guess those are the two things mainly.
So yeah, the accuracy is it's on there, but it is lower because that's a utility stat.
Right.
The chat says they want DPS 1, DPS 2, DPS 3.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and if we were to, I was also gonna say, like, there's some old pieces of gear, like Dark Moor, for instance, that would be like a DPS 1, tank 1, utility 1 kind of thing.
That one's like super utility. The amount of accuracy you get on that.
Yeah, it's just like all of the best.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we didn't really sort of talk about how the templates came about, but I'll jump in here real quick to give a little bit more context for players. Right now, I think we have 21 different templates that we can choose from.
Oh, wow.
And at any given level, like max level, that we potentially have 21 different stat profiles, I guess, for any piece of gear, and that's just based on the number of possible variations that we could have between DPS, utility, and tank, A's, B's, your primary school pairing, your secondary school pairing. So, there's no reason that we had to stop at 21. This was just sort of a good number now, and it should be sufficient until we have used every template in a particular level set, right? And that's not the sort of thing that would typically tend to happen as we are increasing the level band by releasing new content. But if, for example, we were to update 21 old packs to level 150, or 22 packs, right? Then we might have a problem. So that's the kind of thing that we have to look out for. We might need to make new templates. I think that we have some stuff in the works that probably means we'll have more templates anyway. Yeah. But it's fun, whenever when we sat down to design the raid gear, which, by the way, wasn't actually designed at the point that the players started playtesting the raid, right? You guys were playtesting the raid, and we were just dropping you guys participation trophies, and we kind of only had an inkling as to what we were going to do for the gear. The nice thing about these templates is it does make the creation of gear much easier for us. So we're able to sort of to watch and listen and look at the feedback. But we got to sit and we said, well, what template would be good for the gear here? And we were looking at the Merciless gear and the Highlands gear, so it was obvious, and of course I guess even the Villains gear, but it was obvious there were some places where players might find some pieces in a particular template that can shore up some shortcomings of other templates. Now, specifically what I'm talking about here is, Storm all the hitting schools, but Storm in particular was kind of struggling to find power pips and accuracy inside the Merciless set, right? And so having some options in there for some different templates that prioritize utility was important to us. And actually, at the end of the day, we decided that just one template wasn't enough. We thought there was enough demand for other stats on particular slots that we actually wanted to put 2 different templates inside the raid, which is cool. I mean, it makes it a little bit harder for players to get exactly what they're looking for, but it's nice to have that kind of diversity in there.
Yeah, there's more variety. And actually, based on the templates of these 5 sets, I guess like the one that would be the one that's not here yet, would be the defense 1, damage 2, and utility 3. I guess that's like the missing one.
Yep. Wait. Yes, you're right.
All right.
And the seventh template that as some of you might remember, we tried for a second on the Highlands gear, which was a 2-2-2 template, but it was a little too powerful because
I remember that. That was back in test
you weren't
zone.
giving up anything, so we're gonna have to rethink about that before we
Yeah.
put that out.
Yeah, if you look at all the templates, they're sort of categorized as 3-2-1, right? There's kind of 6 points of
Yeah.
stuff there, but we recognized pretty early on that anything that was built out as a 2-2-2 was just always the best choice, because you didn't really have to give up anything, and the sort of the average of those stats where they fell in the middle was just really, really sweet. We will probably release what we would call a 2-2-2 set at some point, but it's going to require us to go into those templates and really sort of fine tune exactly what a 2 means. So in a 2-2-2 set, for example, the amount of critical that you get from a 2-2-2 set wouldn't be as high as the amount of critical you would get from a 3-2-1 set, if that makes sense. So even though they both would be 2s, they kind of have to come down a little bit, otherwise they're strictly too good.
Yeah.
We'll have to take a look at that and see.
All right, thank you for that. And with templates, there's just one more question that I want to go over, or I want to ask, and it is that will we ever see a Spiral Villains or Highlands, or I guess those are the two that don't have it, Ring or Athame, or do we have to wait for future sets or participate in raids to have more variety in picking Athames and Rings?
Right.
So, like, for example, right now with like Athames, we have like the Merciless set has an Athame, and we have the Nullities set and the Void set. So those are 3 out of the 5. But for Spiral Villains and for Highlands, there's no Athame or Ring. So, like, do those follow the gear template in the same way that the hat, robe, boots, and wand do, or is that like different?
Right. So the reason that happened is because in the past, or just how packs are typically done, is that they have the cosmetic pieces, hat, robe, boots, and wands, and they don't have the rest. I believe we're thinking of adding the rest into the future, right? I don't remember. Yeah.
It's kind of a question for it intersects with the product team, right? Because we don't ordinarily put gear that doesn't have a visual on it into a pack. I think if players have a desire for it, we certainly could do it. I don't think it would be difficult for us to do. Probably the most difficult part of that would be sort of rebalancing the pulls that you get out of the pack, so that players who are in search of the visual gear don't end up having that stuff show up less often, because now that slot, that pull is occupied by an Athame or a Ring. So again, it's certainly doable. I think in order of who I would allow to drive that decision, it would be players first, and then product, and then finally design, right? So design can respond to what the players and the product team are interested in seeing there. So it's certainly a possibility.
All right, and so that's it for this topic. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is going to be desirability and accessibility. So in the dev diary, you mentioned one of the challenges of creating new gear was, quote, finding the right balance between existing gear and new gear, end quote. You mentioned that no stat would decrease between level bands, and you wouldn't lose an entire stat on a piece of gear, such as the robe losing all offensive stats. So my first question is, there are certain pieces of gear at lower levels that give a lot of a certain stat. Most notably, the Castle Darkmoor Malstair robes, which are level 100 plus robes, give the highest accuracy percentage for your school based on how much you need to not fizzle, to the point where they're still used at max level in many different builds. Now, my question is, to make new robes more desirable, would you change the stats on lower level pieces of gear, or would you rather do it by making higher level gear more desirable?
Well, definitely the latter there. Yeah, so when coming into this, we knew that was an issue, and rather than nerfing the Mali robes, which a lot of players have asked for, but also a lot of players have dreaded, or like not like, oh, please don't touch this, you know. So basically, we're hoping that it's a choice where there's like the new robes. I know like some people do still run Malastare robes, but some people run the Merciless robes as well. So it's more of a choice than it is a direct buff in either direction. Accuracy is something we'll talk about a bit later, but I do think just over time it'll get more outdated, and I don't think it requires a direct edit.
Yeah, so I mean the existence of all the previous gear in the game was more than anything else kind of the hurdle that we had to clear to undertake this at all, right? And so we had to make decisions as to whether nerfing the gear was something we wanted to do. And another consideration for us was, you know, the types of stats that you got on certain gear slots changed. And we wanted to try to standardize that. What that meant, unfortunately, was, you know, first, our decision not to nerf things, and secondly, our decision to try to put all of the stats back on the same slots, right? Those two things meant that if we did that, then players would be able to make combinations of gear where those stats, you know, were suddenly much higher. So those were two things that we had to consider, and we it's reflected in the high stats that you guys see now, right? A lot of players are like, wow, when they first saw the Merciless template rolling out, they were like, what in the world? Why are these stats so high? And that's the reason why, is because we had to sort of normalize the gear that we were creating in the future against all of the gear that exists in the game. By the way, there is a ton. The early work that Artie was doing in Excel involved doing a statistical analysis of all of the gear in the game. So he actually had to re-export all of the gear in the game, at least the stat lines for it, not the visuals, but he re-exported all of that gear into his spreadsheet. And it's so large that we couldn't assess all of the gear in the game in the same spreadsheet, right? Just Excel can't handle that much. It's just way too much data for Excel to want to do. And of course, you know, it wasn't helped by the fact that Artie had a lot of really sort of complicated equations in there that were designed to find certain stats on the gear in a certain slot. That spreadsheet is kind of a marvel in terms of how it parses all the data in the game. But that was the only realistic way for us as designers to get a handle as to what was out there. You know, obviously we can ask the new guys like Cam and Drew and Tom, hey, what's the best gear in slot at such and such a level? And they would have an opinion on that was based in good, solid experience. But you never know, right? And so we would actually find sometimes that there was some overlooked piece of gear that was much higher in certain places.
Oh,
so,
yeah, there's some random Azteca boots or something that has a ton of ice resist for no reason. There's just random stuff.
Yeah, like
that I never would have
30
known.
plus resist. I don't feel like
Yeah.
it's cool.
It's just
So what the gear rework was trying to do was to take the gear that existed in the game, sort of find a through line, normalize it, right, and then make sure that the new gear that we put out was at least in the conversation with other stuff, right? It should feel like whether it's new gear or old gear, you had options. And again, we did not really have much of an appetite for going in and nerfing gear one piece of gear at a time. It's easy to call out things like the Darkmoor gear or the Sky Iron Hosta, or other places where the gear is way over you know, what's expected for that level band. And especially if that gear persists, you know, I'm not sure how far the Sky Iron Hosta persists. Level 30 to level 100, I guess in some cases, 30 to 80, something like that. Way too long, right? And the players know this, and we know it, and the players know it. It's not fun to not get excited about new gear, right? So we had to find something that would work for the new gear, where I didn't blow the old stuff out of the water, but also didn't require us to go back and nerf all the old stuff. I'm sorry that answer took so long, but
No, it's okay. It's a very detailed answer. And actually, I'll have another question about that in a second here as well, to touch more on the the 30 to 100. I'll have another question about that as well. But my next question here is to add more gear progression and also provide options for gear at the different PvP level bands. We now have new gear, we have new gear at level 50, 100, and 150, which neatly fits between the good gear we've had from before, which was level 30, which was Mount Olympus, level 60, which was Waterworks or Zigzag, 100, which was Darkmoor, and level 130, which was Dragoon. And there's now a smoother progression in gear throughout the leveling process. However, a lot of the new gear is significantly more difficult to get, where the drop rates feel very low at all 3 level bands, and especially with the level 50 and level 100 Chrysalis gear not having a tier 2 set to craft into the main gear like we have at level 130 and level 150. So my question is, do you have any plans on addressing this in a way to make the gear more desirable to someone that's not stopping at that level for PvP, and how would you go about that? So this is where, like for example, the Sky and Hasta at level 30, it's a really, really good wand, but at level 50 and at level 100, we now have newer wands which arguably are better, but because of the drop rates and because there's no way to craft into it, like how would you go about addressing that, I guess?
Take it away, Cam.
I was gonna defer to you on that one. Just like I think we could do that. I think there is some things with drop rates that we should be looking at in those worlds, but I don't know what else to say about that. Ratbeard.
I threw the question to Cam, or threw Cam under the bus, I guess is a better way to put it. Because the drop rates, Cam has handled a lot of the drop rates for the stuff since he came on board, and generally speaking, I think he's done a good job.
Well, no,
but
no, I'm kidding.
But he's doing that. He's doing that at the direction of Artie and myself, right? So, I think players are used to things being easier to get than they are right now, and I won't say much more about that other than that we are kind of listening to all the feedback from players and taking that into account. So.
Yeah.
We'll see, I guess, is a better answer.
Okay. Another question.
If Artie were here, he would say it's good to want things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If I guess like if you could just make a give gear button, we'd love that for sure. All right. Anyways,
not good to want that.
All right. Question number 3. This is again more towards accessibility. Currently, there's no way to farm for the Spiral Villains gear, and if you try to buy the pack through membership loyalty, you're limited to 2 packs each time the loyalty shop resets, which can usually take like a month, maybe more. And also, the Highlands gear requires someone in your team or on your friends list to own the gauntlet to be able to farm it. So my question is it your intention to make every piece of gear with this new template system farmable?
You
go ahead.
I was gonna say, so there are new places that we're like new farming places that we're adding, and we'll add templates to those. We could have like a new, I don't know, like a new boss rematch or a raid that drops a very similar template to those without making them farmable specifically, but we also did make the Highlands gear accessible via PvP, and maybe Ratbeard could expand a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so we have a desire on the design team to have some kind of craftable option for pack gear, but mostly our intent is to put that into PvP, right? So it'll be accessible from PvP. I would have to think about whether we would want that to be accessible via PvE. Probably not, but that's not a no. And then with respect to how we go about it in PvP, new stuff I think we could do faster. Like since we're already there making the gear, we could go ahead and make the recipes at the same time. And then old stuff is kind of going to be up to the players. I had every intention of asking periodically, like in every KI Live, hey, what kind of pack gear would you like to see craftable? And I wouldn't mind even taking certain recipes out of the out of the PvP crafting periodically just to keep it fresh. Like, so we might retire a set that players aren't crafting and then put something new in there. So it's something that we want to sort of let the players drive the conversation. One of the things we're trying to do is to avoid the appearance of pay to win in PvP. And one of the ways that we want to do that is by allowing players to craft these things. Of course, it does take some hard work. Although I do think recently I lowered I made the crafting recipes for the PvP gear a little bit easier.
Yeah, they got a lot easier. Yeah,
a lot easier. Okay, so it's a lot easier than it was. But it's still non-trivial to do it.
Yeah. And now oh, sorry to cut you off, but
well, I know, I have a lot less I'm not so concerned about PvE being pay to win, I guess, because you're not really competing against anybody. So the urgency to do that for PvE is different than it is for PvP, because I definitely feel the pain from the PvP players when they feel like someone has a dramatic competitive edge. So
I guess for me that it's less to do with like PvE, but more with for example, raids. Like in raids, there's like some of the roles are using pieces of gear that are like from bundles, for example, that give, like, for example, we have in our strategy, we have a healer on our team with like multiple pieces of different bundle gear. And one thing I will say I liked with like with the PvP, it's just the stats that are craftable for the gear, which is all that, like at least in terms of like gameplay wise, like the stats being craftable is really, really nice. And then obviously like the cosmetic, that's that's from the pack and stuff. So but
there's a comment in the chat I want to follow up on, because Lauren says, if I can find it now, I'll paraphrase since I can't read it. The comment was about, basically you have to buy the packs where you don't get the best gear. It's worth mentioning that, as you guys have seen, it's not really clear that any one template has a distinct advantage over any other template, right? There may be certain combinations of templates where something makes a better build, or you might be interested in something that has a particular template on it. But the way the templates are designed, the crown shop gear shouldn't just be strictly better than any other templates you can get in the game, right? So if you're not getting Highlands gear, the Merciless gear is a reasonable alternative to that. Again, it's going to depend on what your build is and what you're chasing after. But one of the things that this gear Rework has done for us is to, like I said, normalize the stats that are on gear, and that's true whether the gear is dropping in the game or available from the ground store. For us, like, our opinion is the thing that should be driving you to the crown store more than anything else is that the stuff looks cool.
Yeah.
That's what we want players to be thinking, is like, wow, that Morganth gear looks really cool. I want to dress up like Morganth. And so that's what we would like to be the primary driver to that. So, they will have a different template, and you might find that template is rewarding to you. But I wouldn't say it's strictly true that, Highlands gear is always better than Merciless gear. It's really contextual.
Yeah. All right, and my last question on desirability and accessibility is actually, again, like I just touched on raids. It actually has to do with raids, and basically, in this game, usually the more time, effort, or crowns you put into something, usually it would follow that you're able to get better stats or better tiers on spell elements. And right now, the new raids which are added to the game, they're extremely challenging, and no one has beaten the full run tap. Well, I guess I wrote this question before last night, but we managed to beat it last night, but other than that, no one's beaten the full run. Thank you. I appreciate it. That will be available like probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, our POV of that, because it was off stream. But yeah, they're extremely challenging.
I want to jump in. I have so many questions.
Oh yeah, I mean, go for it.
It's not a raid conversation, but I'll point out that you did it with 5 minutes to spare. So, that's about what we expected, right? We knew the players would get there eventually. If you're running the raid and you're running out of time and you're blaming the RNG or you're blaming the animation time, I think for the most part you're off base. It just means that you're not as efficient as Ferric is in all the things that Ferric does. So, congrats to you, well deserved.
I don't want to take away.
Sharing it with people as well. So.
Yeah, we will be sharing that as well. But I don't want to take up too much time. But I will say on that note, yeah, if you are getting a lot of RNG with animation time, you're probably doing something that allows that animation time in the first place. Because, and I'll just leave it at that for now. So yeah, I'll just say that. But anyways, so yeah, raids are super challenging, and almost no one has beaten the full run to have access to all the gear yet. And even if someone does, they're meant to be challenging. The raids themselves are meant to be challenging to the point where many people either won't be able to do them or will be discouraged from trying them out. Obviously, those people would not want for the raid gear to give you a large advantage that is out of reach for a lot of players. But at the same time, the people that won the raid want to feel rewarded for completing such a difficult challenge. So my question is, how do you go about balancing the raid gear in a way that's best for both worlds so that it feels both rewarding but is also not super overpowered?
Yeah, so this is something we talked about a lot when we were discussing raid gear. Is how, like, if we make it too good, then people are gonna feel like they're forced to do the raid when it's not. We don't want to force people into it because it is that hard, and not everybody is a super social or able to yeah. And then, but also if it's not good enough, then it won't feel as rewarding to the people who did it. And so basically what we did is, as we talked about earlier, we added 2 templates, so there's more chance that there's something there that you would find interesting in your sets. And I do think with the feedback we've heard so far that it does do a pretty good balance on both, although I have heard the criticism on both sides, as the people are like, why am I forced to do this, or it's not good enough. So it's just tough.
It's a really tough balance to get, and I don't even know if we did it right. We hope we did, but I don't know. And because the raid gear can't be so good that people feel compelled to do it, right? But it has to be good enough that other people feel rewarded for doing it. But I will say that our intent with the raid, I think first and foremost, was to give the players an interesting challenge. If you're not playing the raid because you enjoy the intellectual challenge that the raid presents, and by the way, it's designed in such a way that it can present you a different challenge each time you approach it, right? We're kind of seeing that now in players. They go into the raid and they see which mobs have spawned with the bosses, and if they don't like the mobs they back out. I'm going to say that's suboptimal, and I'm not going to give any more of a hint than that. But the raid is designed to be stimulating content, right? It's designed to be something that you play because you enjoy the challenge of it, and it is challenging. I don't want to speak for Ferric, but I'm going to guess that, well, when I watch, for example, Sauce attempting the raid with his viewers, yes, it's true that he has access to a lot of people who are interested in being in his guild, and so it's easy for him to assemble 12 players. But at the same time, he's herding cats. He doesn't really know who these people are, and each night, it's a different group of 12 people. It's a lot harder to do. I'm going to guess that Ferric's crew was better known to each other, right? So they probably experienced less confusion and frustration in terms of the getting everybody on the same page and getting it to work. And I expect that would be true for people who are creating, for non-streamer people who are creating guilds amongst their friends. And by the way, don't say that you can't get in a guild because you don't have 12 friends. The point of the guild is to make 12 friends, right? So, find people who are interested in making guilds and gather. At the moment, gathering with the streamers is a good way to do that, right? Get into a group of streamers, meet the people that are in that raid, and then those people can splinter off and form their own groups. Because I'm getting the sense, unsurprisingly, that people are going to float between guilds. People who are skilled at completing the raid will end up floating between guilds and teaching more people. This is just a case where the knowledge has to spread throughout the community. So anyway, Ferric can confirm or deny that if he wants, but I don't think there's a huge advantage in terms of manpower, bodies, for a streamer right now, but I don't think it's a huge advantage in terms of organization. It kind of means you're going to have to be talking to randos every single night and getting on the same page. It's funny. I enjoy watching the streamers get frustrated with new people each time. But,
no, that's actually very, very true. And we actually for our guild, and this was before we made our guild and we were testing it out in Test Realm. every time a new player had to come in, like you have to teach them like the whole role, and even like because people consider the drum roll as something that's like easy, but you still have to like teach a player how to do that and learn that and like be on top of that. And having having like not too many players dedicated to that is actually like a skill in of itself, because you have to be really, really quick with knowing all the different spots. And so by eliminating the amount of people that have to be on that, there's other roles which are very important outside. And like a lot of us did know each other pretty well. And like, I think one of the biggest reasons why we won was just like mid game, when things get a little bit hectic, like people are like really, really calm with each other. And like, we all like trust each other and know that like, you know, our decision making is going to be good and we can rely on our teammates for everything. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I feel like we ended up winning the raid.
Well, and the last thing with respect to the raid loot, right, and how desirable it feels. Right now, players are scratching for that first win. It's very hard to get that first win, but we fully expect the key, the solution, and there's not one solution set, but there are things that you need to know, right? As the knowledge propagates, the idea that raid gate will be open for you and your guild for 3 hours per key, you're going to get multiple runs at this thing out of a single key, right? And you'll get the strategy down. You'll get a good team. You'll click. You'll sync up, and so it'll get easier, right? And so that's kind of what we have to balance our gear against, is the idea that someone might get 6 runs out of 3 hours. I said that this morning. I said, you might get 6 runs if you're lucky. I was just dividing 3 hours by 30 minutes, thinking that the raid takes 30 minutes. And Ferric corrected me and said, we're going to get 7 because we're going to do it faster than 30 minutes.
I think actually, it's actually possible to get 8 runs in. Even I think if you do it in 25 minutes every single run, you can actually sneak. Like if assuming it doesn't kick you out of the raid, you can actually get in like an 8th run. Technically, if you're super fast and if you're that good.
Yeah, I think if you get in 1 second before it closes, then it'll stay open, obviously, while you're inside there. I don't believe that it regurgitates players who are in the middle of a raid. So as long as you get in before it closes, you should be good to go.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's the. Anyways, we got a little bit off topic with it, but it was fun to talk about. Again, I'll post that point of view and hopefully also other points of view as well in the near future. But back to the gear. The next topic that I want to discuss was related to school identity and dual schooling with the new gear. So my first question on that topic is going to be that first off, in the dev diary, you covered that certain schools had lower stats on certain pieces of gear, most notably fire having very low damage on the robe and ring, to the point where even ice has more damage on both pieces of gear, and the same can also be applied for the Highlands robes as well. So I guess like we can kind of see a pattern of maybe like the robe and the ring in general are just like less desirable pieces of gear for the fire. What was the reason for those 2 slots having such low damage, I guess?
Artie's back.
I was going to say, Cam, before you get started, maybe
I was going to say he would love to. Yeah, Artie would love to talk about this.
Go for it. Welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, Cam, I was going to let you start it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there were different things that we were considering. Like, there were some practical reasons why the stat distribution kind of fell the way it did. Because, and this will be more maybe what Cam dives into, which is, we were carefully trying to balance the gear relative to existing gear for any sort of level band. And so sometimes you might have gear that represents sort of an outlier for one stat or another, for one school or another. And so we didn't want to necessarily invalidate all the gear that was in a level band. At the same time, we didn't want to just make the stats larger than anything. So it was kind of there was a lot of massaging that happened. But also some of the things that we were discussing and considering was we are trying to distribute the drop locations for this different gear from different bosses or different rematches or different locations, different sources, and for different slots within a template. And so we were imagining how some schools may prioritize certain encounters over other schools, and then how we might want to distribute those chases so not everyone is chasing the same bosses for the same reasons. And so sometimes a stat in a piece of gear may increase by a certain amount in a certain level range for one school and not for another school, and so there'll be noise in that way also. But it all contributes into a stat profile that's represented by the template overall. So comparing just individual slotted pieces of gear to one another isn't terribly useful from one school to the next. It's useful within a school, and then understanding that stat profile for that piece of gear in that slot contributes to a stat profile for the template overall.
Hey, this is Spark. I'm just jumping in here. In case anybody was curious, Artie does not know. Well, maybe he does, but I don't think he knows how to whistle like a bird. He actually has a bird.
Yeah, and the bird is now awake and playing. So I'm going to mute while Cam and Ben translate or elaborate or kind of whatever. But I mean, that's generally kind of the way we approached it.
Yeah, while everything Artie said is definitely true. There's another factor with specifically the fire, which Ferric did point out in his video, is that one of the things we did was kind of revert the idea, the thing where fire had more damage than storm. So with storm now having higher damage than fire got a little bit less, and since
is the same true also of Myth having more Pierce than Storm? Did Storm catch up on Pierce?
Storm has the highest Pierce on their new gear, yeah.
And or there was something with like Myth having the most crit or something, and I think we made that switch as well. I don't remember exactly, but stuff like that. And since robes past level 100 it didn't used to have damage at all, that would probably be why that one would be the lowest. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons. But I would like to reiterate that fire still has more damage than those other schools like Ice and Death and whatever across their set. So
we basically had to index and analyze like 30,000 pieces of gear, and we were trying to bring some sense of order to how gear progresses from levels 1 to 150. And there was a lot of, odd pivots that the gear progression took over the past decade or plus. And so what we were trying to do is make it so that we could bring it into, make it more orderful, I suppose, is the best way, because and this was influenced by our approach to PvP, where we wanted to be able to start feeding in new gear sets into lower levels at the Master League or Exalted League or something like that, and we wanted to be able to have a single system kind of governing all those things, so that as we go back and look at spell audit or element progression for existing spells, and then we have a base, more understandable base foundation from which we can begin to balance those things.
All right. Any other thoughts on that question, or I feel like y'all did a pretty good job covering that.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. I'll move on. All right, I'll move on to the next question. Okay, so that was related to the damage. So another question that I had, something that I noticed was that was related to the percentages of accuracy that a certain set gives compared to how much is needed to not fizzle between different schools. So for example, Life, which is the highest accuracy school, they get more accuracy, like compared to how much they need to not fizzle a spell, they get much more as a percentage than Storm gets. And like in PvP, basically a fizzle can very easily cost you a game, which restricts the gear that the lower accuracy school can use a lot more than the higher accuracy schools. So why is it a lot easier for certain schools to get accuracy they need to not fizzle a spell compared to other schools?
And I'll handle that one.
Go
I
for it.
haven't. I mean, you're basically asking why at any given level is life less likely to fizzle than storm, right? That's what you're asking. Why is life less likely to fizzle than storm? Life has the higher accuracy, and they have and sort of accuracy is the thorn in storm's side sort of consistently. That's my answer. As the level cap goes up, that may fade away. I'll let Cam or Artie weigh in on that portion of it.
Well, to me, it's part of the school's identity. I mean, Storm was always a big, it has random aspects to it. It's always sort of high risk, high reward school, and part of that's part of its identity, and that identity is reflected in its stat profile. Like as you progress, and in any school, you're not all the schools are going to gravitate to the same stat profile. Every school has things they're good at and things they're not so good at. Now, Storm has ways to mitigate what its failings are, just like life has ways to mitigate its failings with different, whether it's jewels or pets or kind of what have you. But the fact is that Storm is good at certain things and not so good at other things, and one of the things it's not so good at is accuracy. And so that's just part of its personality. And so we didn't want to normalize everything to where all the schools became increasingly the same. We were trying to define the schools by their historical sort of understood personalities, and then making sure that when we were looking at the stat distributions that they would reflect those things. That's why, fire now, or Storm now will have more damage than fire, because Storm was always supposed to be the damage dominant school. And so we wanted to kind of make sure that we were more clearly defining what these schools were, and then trying to stay true to those things, whether it's in stats or in the spells or kind of what have you.
Yeah, just I think like just the way I saw it was at lower levels, it just like, to me, it made more sense where Storm had a much higher chance to fizzle, just because at lower levels the health is like a lot closer from one another, and so down there, Storms, I feel like their damage per pip on their spell shines more, but at higher levels where Storm's health is a lot lower, their damage per pip kind of makes sense, in that other schools have higher health, and so at that point it just becomes like, is a fizzle much more costly to a Storm Wizard than it is for other schools? And I feel like what a lot of players feel like is a fizzle's equally as costly for many different schools, and so everyone wants to try to go for that 100% accuracy. And so like I feel like that's just where a lot of people feel like Storm having lower accuracy does feel a little bit unfair on the gear. But I don't know if you had anything to like touch on that, knowing that. But
well, and then I'll let Cam and Ben chime in. I mean, to me, it's a matter of like what you have stat space, you have stat modifying space that is fixed to the gear. Then you have jewel slots in your pet, which are flexible based on the needs of whatever your playstyle is or whatever your school is. And so I don't necessarily think it's too much to ask that Storm maybe dedicate more towards mitigating their accuracy through jewels or pets or kind of whatever, than maybe another school that might need to dedicate that space more to damage, where Storm may not need to do that. But that's how we got there.
Yeah, this came up in conversation today with an ice player, with respect to resist, right? Because by lowering the resist limit for season 3, it's not so much one of the practical effects of that is that ice, based on the fact that they tend to have more resist on their gear, they just have new options, right? They could continue to chase the highest resist, but they are able to make different choices where resist is concerned, and they can try to spike something else. So with life and accuracy, it's the same thing, right? If life is getting more accuracy in more places, then they have some flexibility to build up somewhere else. And I think the storm folks, well, they may have something. They may have something to their argument, that they feel like they have to give up too much to get their accuracy, or it's just impossible to get their accuracy. I'm not sure I'm convinced how hard they're actually trying to do that. I think they probably have just decided that they want to have the best of all possible worlds because other schools can't, right? And it's difficult, especially because accuracy and power pips they have a finite endpoint. You either have 100% or you don't. And if you don't have 100%, as the players always say, 99% is like having 50%. The fact that you can fail those particular rolls is a big binary difference, right? It's not like giving up 10 points or even 1 point of damage, right? You can give up 1% of damage. It's not all the same thing. Giving up 1% to power pip means you've got that 99%, and you're going to fail pip. It's going to cost you a match. So the pressure on those two stats is certainly different than it is for the other stats. So, but I'm just not sure that I'm willing to concede that Storm shouldn't always struggle with accuracy. I think Storm should always struggle with accuracy.
And it is important to note that the Merciless gear is Utility 3, which is all people had access to for a while. But with this new raid gear as the Utility 2, and I think a lot of Storm Wizards are seeing like, oh wait, I could run these boots instead of these boots, and I'd get my 100 accuracy. So you don't necessarily need to give up all that much. It just might be a little gear shift.
And that's at the cost of a lot less damage, because now the damage stat is also a lot higher favored in that set. So yeah. And now we get to dual schooling. So my first question on dual schooling, and I just want to make sure how we're doing on time. How much time do we have for more questions?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. So I guess we will probably be able to... I have a few more questions left, and then we can go... Sure. If there's still time after that, we can go towards chat questions maybe. So, all right. So for dual schooling, my first question. So as an introduction, dual schooling is a direction that y'all have been going towards since the spring as well. And you mentioned that you're adding these stats without sacrificing on other stats to promote it. And with this recent update, we've also seen the Professor's Horde pack get the stats based on the same Merciless gear template, but the gear can be equipped by any school. However, outside of the Professor's gear, it's still hard to justify using damage spells from other schools based on our current options. How do you plan on making dual schooling more viable?
In effort to not say too much, I would say Ratbeard should probably answer this one.
Oh.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, well, first of all, we plan to do it in the future.
Right.
The first, how we plan to do that, I'm not sure that Artie wants to spoil that. Personally, I don't care. But we do have plans to make dual schooling more viable. Not just more viable. I mean, well, there's a question as to whether options equal power. I think most of us would agree that options equal power, right? So in the case of the Professor's Horde packs, players said, "Oh, this is really powerful stuff." I mean, the stat profile is exactly the same as the Merciless stuff, right? But the ability to put it on and now have access to, to maybe play something outside the expected school, that's powerful, right? Options can be powerful. So we'll add those options for you to dual school. We have plans for that. I don't know if Artie wants to hint at what we're planning on that or not.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of different options to make dual schooling more attractive, because we do feel like it'll add variety to PvE and PvP alike. And so we think there's value there in encouraging players to mix a secondary or tertiary school with their primaries and make it at least a viable option during combat. And it's a complicated question because in some cases, players get a feel for what damage to expect coming out of an attack, and if they don't see the damage values or stat as high as they expect, then they kind of lose a feel for how they could control a combat. So some of it isn't necessarily related to raw stats, it's related to system feedback. So something like, if we had a training dummy or something where people could actually begin to reverse engineer the math behind it, they may start to see that they may not need the highest stats to be effective. So that's just a complicated question. So, and there's a lot of, we could go into it, but there's not just one or two things that we're looking at in the immediate to give players more power when it comes to dual schooling. there's a lot of things. I don't know what you want to talk about. Because there's several different things that we're kind of pursuing.
Well, one thing I would just comment on, because I've seen the comment from players from time to time. They'll say, "I wish they would stop doing this dual school stuff or pushing dual school stuff on us." Now, we have reasons, which we feel are very good reasons for pushing dual school. We think that decks are generally too thin, that your choices have collapsed, that the gameplay, both PvE and PvP, would be more interesting with a greater diversity of spells. We fundamentally believe that to our bones, and that's the direction that we're going. But we're not really pushing players to do dual school. So we're not, your gear doesn't have to give up anything to be dual school, right? If you want to play mono, you'll have exactly the same stats in your mono school as somebody who happens to be playing dual school, because that's just how we're building the gear. The dual school is a free addition. Like, if you'd like to consider playing a second school, we're going to make it possible for you to do that. But again, I believe that options are power. Certainly, we add. Go ahead.
Just as as evidence of that is so if you look at Beast Moon and kind of what we were doing there, especially with the Mayhem, where you might have to pivot from your comfort zone sometimes to meet a particular challenge. And I've been watching a lot of the streams trying to attack the raid, and I feel as if some players are running into a wall when they're not embracing what Ratbeard's talking about, which is options or power. And but they get and I think a lot of players would have the opinion that in PvE, like the rank and file PvE, not necessarily the scripted boss encounters, tend to be too rinse and repeat. So you can be hyper focused, and you can have a standard rotation of power activations in a card game. And I think some players would like it to be a bit more interesting, where possibly some sort of unpredictable setup happens in a combat that requires you to pivot, that would reward you for versatility. And so that's kind of what we're going for. We see it in PvP. People have to pivot in reactions to their opponents. And I think it makes for a more compelling experience. We're not, and to Ratbeard's point, we're not forcing anyone to engage in that. Beast Moon does it, the raid does it, but those aren't required activities for anybody. And we're not going to disrupt what some of the gameplay experience people have grown accustomed to and enjoy, and those who like the story and exploration, things like that. We're not looking to disrupt their experience. What we're looking to do is maybe create areas where possibly a more interesting and diverse combat experience is available to people who want it or are interested in it. And so that's why when the question comes up about dual school, it's really complicated. It's real complex in terms of everything that it may impact and everything that we may have planned or in considering, things like that. So anyhow.
Yeah, I think I like the point about it's not like you have to sacrifice anything to do that right now. Because I think even in the dev diary, it mentioned that like all the stats that are added for dual schooling, they're not impacting the main stats in any way. It's simply like an extra option that you have access to right now.
Yeah, it's all additive. And then, I've seen comments from PvE focused players who don't see necessarily value in those stats, and they don't see value in progressing the spellment spells to at all, actually. And it's because right now the main sort of combat cycle, doesn't need it. And there's not a lot of, I know Wizard players know there's not a lot of stat pressure in PvE currently to grind for the best gear and things like that. Not for your run-of-the-mill type of normal combat. And so, what we're looking to do is for those people who are looking for additional challenges, whether it's in PvP or whether it's in the raid or even some of the skeleton key boss fights or the rematches, we want to provide them opportunities to more fully explore stat builds, dual schooling, spellment progressions, different progression combinations that fit their play style, and then also can be effective against these different kind of challenges we're rolling out and refining.
All right. Last question on this topic will be so it's once again related to dual schooling, and currently dual school stats on gear follow the Rochambeau in a way where the school in front of you or behind you on the Rochambeau wheel, and this is where I'm just realizing I probably should have had a Rochambeau wheel. In fact, let me pull one up right now. There you go. There's a Rochambeau wheel right up there on the top left. So currently the dual school stats follow in a way where the school in front of you or behind, where you get the stats for the extra dual school stats for the school in front of you or behind you on the Rochambeau wheel. And with the balance gear, from what I've seen, it looks like it picks 2 of the 6 schools which are opposites to each other on the wheel. So like for example, life will get either fire or storm stats because those are the 2 schools that are in front and behind it, and that's just kind of how like the synergies for the Rochambeau are set up. So my question is, do you plan to add stats for more combinations of dual schooling, such as 2 schools apart from each other, for example life and death stats, or opposite schools, for example fire and death?
I will add a point of clarification that we do have the some gear for the opposite schools, like fire and death.
Oh right, the spiral
right now the villains gear is like that. As far as the other ones, where basically within elemental and within spiritual, we do have plans for that, but I don't know how much we want to say.
Go ahead, Brad.
The chat was asking, when we first started this topic of conversation, dual school, the chat was asking triple school, quadruple school. Somebody said octuple school, which I guess is a request for that eighth school again. But again, Artie can yell at me later without giving too much away. I would say that the solutions that we have in mind for the future for dual school can be extrapolated to multiple schools if you want. Now, I personally feel like there's a point of diminishing returns. Having seen kids put together Magic the Gathering decks and try to put everything in the kitchen sink into the same deck, it starts to break down at a certain point. But yeah, in terms of the system, I think we can support whatever you can imagine. Will all the gear templates do it? Probably not. The gear templates probably wouldn't do that. So.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a dev diary we wrote, I don't know, a year ago or something, that was going into player agency, player choices, meaningful decisions. And so that's the direction we want to take it. So providing players meaningful choices with gear and deck construction, and then they can find they can discover what is optimal for how they want to play or the role they need to fill. Like with the introduction of raids and maybe future more complex or challenging content, there may be needs for multiple schools that we may not anticipate and players will discover. It is optimal for that challenge. And so that's the direction that we would like to go, is to let players modify their spells, and they already to an extent can modify their stat profiles, and we want to continue to pursue that to allow players the as much freedom as we can grant them to discover what works best for whatever situation they find themselves in.
All right, thank you for answering that one. And at this point, we're done with the main topics. I guess I have like one more topic, but that is kind of just one question, and it is actually to do with set bonuses. So back in 2020, I believe, set bonuses were added to some gear sets where you receive an extra amount of a certain stat depending on how many pieces of that set you were wearing. And the more you wore, the more stats you got. Since mixing and matching gear is encouraged with this latest gear design, are equipment sets something that we will still see with gear, or will that no longer be a thing?
There is certainly room with the template system for set bonuses. We haven't added any yet, but I think they're still interesting.
I have a very practical and boring answer for that. It's just sort of just inside baseball, right? So as probably most of your viewers know, our systems designer was Matt Neddick, and he left. Brain drain is a thing, right? So when Matt Neddick left, a lot of the knowledge as to how to set up gear sets went with him, and so it's just a matter of getting Dominic trained up on it again. And he let me know that it's actually not so hard. So I certainly have an interest in seeing more gear sets come along. And now that we kind of have the skill gap closed in-house to do that, I would like to see it not only for future gear, but even maybe for some of the stuff that we got out there. I'm not sure if I'm going to have to fight Artie on that or not, but...
No, to me, it was less of a practical question and more a question of watching how the community interacted with this new gear paradigm, basically. And then that would help inform the direction. I mean, certainly I would expect gear sets in the future. I like the concept and things like that. How exactly it will sort of realize itself is somewhat to be determined, because we do want to encourage exploration of different gear set combinations. And so on the one hand, if we're wanting to explore that and kind of reward this sort of mixing and matching and discovery of stat profiles and deck constructions and things like that, then a set bonus that's sort of aligned to a specific template works counter to that goal.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And so we have to kind of see how can we get this, how can we work this set bonus in such a way that it stays in alignment with what we want to do with the gear in general. Now, another sort of aspect to this, which I kind of mentioned before with regards to the PvE experience in general and things like that, where we want players to be able to dive down into this into this setup as much as they're comfortable. So like, you'll get some gear, it has the stats you expect for your primary school, then it will have some extra stats on it that has no impact on its primary effectiveness. And then the player can decide whether or not they want to explore leveraging the value of the stats on the gear or not. The same thing with the spellements. Like, some of the spellement paths are more progressing the original effect of the spell. And so players can take it that way to simply gain more power, or they can take it a different way in order to maybe synergize with something else or counter something they expect to run into. And so, set bonuses would be I think would end up being part of that. So again, we're kind of watching as we get more templates out there. We're watching to see our players seeing value in them. And it's actually encouraging to see some players see great value in them and other players see no value in them, because that means the person who sees great value has a stat profile in mind that they're pursuing, and the other one is satisfied with what they have. And so that means that's sort of the reaction we would expect. We wouldn't expect everyone to be chasing everything. We would expect people to be chasing the things that they're interested in. And so anyway, we just have to kind of see where that takes us, and then see how we want to pursue set bonuses as a extension of that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, like with set bonuses, like the fact that you could get set bonuses from multiple sets, I thought that was cool, but also it is nice to hear that, because like the one worry, my main worry with that was also, if set bonuses are going to be a thing, how do you make them so that like it doesn't just encourages you to just use one full set. But it's good to hear that. That's definitely something in consideration. And that's the only question that I had related to set bonuses. At this point, before I take any chat questions, there is a bonus topic, and it does not have really anything to do with gear, but it was definitely a recommendation by Artie, and I agreed that this is a good thing to talk about, and it is related to skeleton keys. So with this update, basically what's happened is lore spell elements have now been added to different worlds, the worlds that are based, basically each lore pack that dropped like 3 or 4 different spells had a certain theme to it, and it was basically themed off of a certain world. And so there's been either a new skeleton key boss created in that world that drops the spellments for those spells, or previous skeleton key bosses in those worlds are changed to follow a new system where I believe like the way the loot works is you get something around like 14 or 15 spellments. You get a piece of gear from whatever pack that those spellments originated from. You have a chance of getting a permanent mount. You get some of the new Azoth that you need for guilds, and you also have a chance of getting like socket wrenches. But obviously, with how high value the drops are now on those lore skeleton key bosses, keys became more difficult to get. But right now, currently, we know of 2 ways to get the keys, which is through crafting them in the arena, and I'm actually going to go to the arena right now, but right now you can craft them through Beast Moon, the Beast Moon moonstones that you use. You use those to craft those into gold skeleton keys, and then for Decathlon, the runes that you have, you craft those. But other than that, and then I think there's also like on the PvP progress bar, there's a skeleton key that you can get. But other than that, at least we don't know of any ways to get gold skeleton keys. So I guess I mean, I don't really have like a question, but like I just want to hear like your thoughts on that. And I think like one of the things that the community has been very vocal about is that like the keys are obviously like a lot harder to get, and people are confused. Maybe they don't like the way they can get the keys. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, I guess.
Well, I know that Ben reviewed it on his stream the other day, so I'm going to take my stab at it, and he can kind of correct me, or I may add some details that he may not have included. So Cam and I started looking at skeleton keys in spring. Well, one, I wanted to have a deep dive into the system in general. And part of that was to understand the community's perception of the key's value relative to what historically the company had valued the keys at. And so that's when we decided, Cam warned me, but I did it anyway because I wanted to see what happened. Is we put the skeleton keys in the loyalty store. And the reason why was because I wanted to see, independent of currency, how did players view its value? And so the loyalty store gave the new tokens contextual value based on other things you could purchase, and then players could see what the skeleton keys were. Well, the response was what Cam predicted. Everyone hated the value because they didn't see any value in the skeleton keys. And so at that point, we had a couple of choices to make. We could either devalue what the rewards the skeleton key would unlock, or increase the value of what it would unlock to meet the value of the skeleton key. And that was the direction we decided to take. Was we decided to look to set the value of a skeleton key and then calibrate the rewards to meet that value, which it hadn't been previously. The other thing we did is we took a closer look at the intent behind the system to see what was the designer's original intent who came up with the system, and did the execution of the system stray from that mission over the years. And we found that it did. So that's what caused us to. So on the one hand, we were reevaluating the rewards and the value of the key. Then we were looking at it from an experiential side. What are players supposed to do with the key? Why would they want them? What is it rewarding? And so then we were defining that, which would affect how you get the keys. And then the combination of those things led us to reevaluating the sources of the keys to try to make them align better with what we felt the mission of the system was in general. And so the way that we're expecting people to experience the skeleton keys is that you should be really excited when you get one, and then you should get your friends to come with you to run it, because it's got great value coming out of it relative to what it was. And then we wanted the sources to reflect what the skeleton key system seemed to be originally intended to do, which was reward exploration and social gameplay. And so it made less sense that they would be a result of a solo accessible PvE grind target, and more appropriate to be a part of something that might be more social in nature or more about exploration. So
Look at the walls. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you're
No.
looking, but Ferric is
No, I
showing
don't
his
look.
dorm room, and he's got what, 40 gold keys hanging on the wall.
I think this is like 63 right here.
Well, and that's, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's another point that been brought up, and it's absolutely true. We had to consider the fact that a lot of people had a lot of gold keys. Now, what we could have done is just gone in and said, okay, well, since players don't value gold keys, then we'll just go ahead and double down on that valuelessness. It'll just go ahead and not be valuable, and we won't attempt to add value to it. But, and if you look at it in isolation, maybe that makes sense. Like if you looked at it just from the key side, but when you look at it from what is the experience or what are the emotions that you should be evoking when you get a skeleton key, it didn't make sense to me, at least. Like, what I would like is for it to be a dramatic moment when a player encounters and gets a skeleton key, and they should be really excited, because we want them to be excited to contact their friends and then go run this combat to get the rewards that come out of it. So
as opposed to just sticking it on the wall with 60 other keys.
Right, like just like people. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, and and we heard some of the complaints from the community before we looked at skeleton keys, where they resented the fact that we were asking them to grind a combat for the privilege of grinding another combat. And so, okay, yeah, we heard you. And it's true, right? Because like the skeleton keys, to me, it didn't make much sense. It seemed to run, it was counterintuitive to me that would be how it was set up, versus doing something else to acquire the key that then takes you to combat. And maybe it isn't strictly a PvE combat. The raid is a source, as are the skeleton key bosses and some other things that you'd mentioned, which are also sources. And we're identifying sources that we feel align with the mission of the system in general.
There was one thing I touched on in my rant. I don't want to say rant, in my monologue, and someone in the chat just said it, and I want to address that as well, right? So Zesty Bean says we could have just made a new tier key, that way everyone is on the same playing field, and that's true, right? We could have, like, so we were presented with the decision: do we keep the gold keys basically worth nothing and give the players not very much cool stuff, or do we make the gold keys better and put good stuff in there? And there's no question that the rewards in the gold keys now they're just better. They're way better. There are lore spell elements in there, and they are placed in a way that the players can seek out specific spells that they want to get, and they can get them, right? That's a huge win, right? So now we have a different question, right? What do we do with ferric, right? what do we do with a player like ferric who has a lot of gold keys stored up? And Zesty Bean says, well, you should have made a new kind of key so that everyone's on the same playing field. And I want to talk about that because we are literally coming off the last time that we touched the spell elements, right? And the players said to us very clearly, the high-level players said, I've been playing this game for a long time. And now you're making me feel punished for having played this for a long time, because now it's harder for me to get these spell elements than it is for other people who haven't played for as long. So, we're sort of damned if we do and damned if we don't. We made the decision this time. We said, you know what? Let the players who've played for a long time get some value out of their gold keys. Let's just let them do it. So we handed players a gift. We made the loot inside those gold instances way better than it was before, and we said, all those gold keys you didn't have before, you can go ahead and use those. So, and again, the people who tend to have a lot of gold keys stored up are going to be the most engaged PvE players, right? Because PvP players typically aren't going out and grinding just for the privilege of putting gold keys on their wall. And so there's a gatekeeping instinct now with the PvP players that PvE players who are not as good at PvP as they are suddenly have a leg up. We constantly hear about the barrier to entry to PvP, and here we are giving a leg up to players who haven't done a lot of PvP. No offense to Ferric, I've seen him play; he's not very good, right? Because he's not spending he's not spending all his time in PvP. He's spending all his time in PvE. He's the world's best PvE player, right? Debatable. And he has stuff on the wall there that will enable him to go back and catch up in some way to players who don't have those keys. So it's nothing but this was nothing but a generous instinct on our part to let players use those gold keys, and I hate to see players feel like because someone else gets a benefit from it that they're being negatively impacted by that. That's a shame.
Yeah, and the other part of it that contributes to something, I mean, the way we were organizing it, that sort of emphasizes what I was saying earlier about players having meaningful choices. So not only is it a matter of I have a gold key, what spellments do I want to pursue, and then I have a meaningful choice about where I go and what skeleton key boss I encounter. At the same time, what we're attempting to do is to give a reasonable number of different sources for skeleton keys so players can engage in the game in the way they enjoy to get the things that they want. The challenge is, of course, the skeleton keys themselves are really valuable. And so they couldn't simply stay at the drop rates they had previously because they're too valuable. So we had to reevaluate all the sources and the rate of acquisition relative to the increased value. Like the drop rates are much better. They are now reasonable, if not better. So the gold keys just objectively are worth a lot more now than they were before. And it didn't sit well with me, I suppose, to just invalidate either work that the players have put into accumulating gold keys. and it did feel like we're just giving them value. Those people who have a bunch of these keys, we're giving them a lot of value for, their efforts in collecting and keeping those keys. So that seemed like the fair way to do it.
Yeah, and I will actually add this, and this is actually something I didn't consider that, and Ratbeard introduced it, was that when you go back to the when the spellments were released, I think that was the spring update, right? Yeah, that was the spring update. Everyone back then was saying that like high level players or people that have been playing for a long time, basically they don't get anything, and now this is like the exact opposite of that, in which now like some people are saying that those people shouldn't get an advantage from that. So I don't really have like a strong stance either way, but like I just thought that was an interesting juxtaposition. Sorry, English isn't my first language. Yeah.
That is something that we are. I know that players don't believe that we're sensitive to it, but we're sensitive to it. We are mindful to what we're doing is trying to make the game better for those who enjoy it. And not everyone is going to agree with every change we make, but that's our motive, is that we're trying to improve the experience of the game for people who enjoy it. And so, like with those who had skeleton keys, now that experience is improved. And for those who haven't encountered a skeleton key yet, hopefully that experience is improved, because it should be something infrequent and very valuable. And so players should be motivated to find a full group of 4 and go beat it, find it and beat it. And so, anyway.
Yep. And somebody in chat asked, will there be more ways to get gold keys other than the current methods? And the answer to that is yes, and sooner than you think.
Yeah. Like with each of these things, and this is something that I've noticed that the community isn't accustomed to, I suppose, which is we make incremental changes to a lot of the systems, especially when we're revisiting its existing systems. So we will audit a system, look at it, discern its purpose, see if we can't polish, refine it, or make it more effective at what it was supposed to do in the first place. But those changes will be incremental, because we want to make a certain number of changes and then evaluate the community's reaction to it, and then make some others. So, this is the beginning of sort of revisiting the skeleton key system, not the end.
Right.
All right. So that does it for and thank you for answering that, by the way. I think that was definitely thought provoking. With the skeleton keys at the end there. I guess at this point, if there is time, we can take additional questions from chat. So if y'all want to throw anything out there as a question, you can go ahead and do it right now. I don't know if Spark, if you wanted to add anything here while we're waiting for people to ask questions.
Yes, KI Live is this Thursday at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. Be there, or be without as many things we're going to give away on the show.
Well, there you go. So that's going to be the twitch.tv/KingsIsle Entertainment, I believe. So, yeah.
Twitch.tv/. Yep, that's right. I had to think for that for a second. Yes, we're going to have a KI Live Lite this time. What does that mean? That means all the cool people are going to be on the show. Artie, Ratbeard, of course myself, and I'm missing somebody. Cam, I think maybe you might be there. I don't know.
Am I? Okay.
I don't. I am inviting you officially right now.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it'll just be kind of more of a casual live stream. We're gonna
Right.
actually have Mercedes on the show to show off the guild house a little bit more. We were gonna do that last show, but didn't get a chance.
All right.
Neat.
So Let's see here. So we have a few questions. I guess I'll just pick. I'll just pick one, unless you want to pick one.
Yeah, pick a good one.
Yeah, salty one.
Okay. I feel like and this is kind of expected. A lot of the questions are definitely related to the keys rather than the gear. I feel like that was just bound to happen. But the first one, can we have gold key instances that have not yet had their drops revamped to match the value of this new design, converted temporary to a lower key tier? This would be helpful to keeping the key value where it's meant to be. So like I guess like what they mean by that is you have bosses like Aphrodite, for example, in Darkmoor, which still requires gold skeleton keys, but that boss is known for, you know, like the gear is kind of difficult to get. So obviously you can see where now if a key is really, really high value and the gear is really difficult to get, it kind of like brings into question, like, you know, like, is this boss even worth farming anymore, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's something we know we need to address, as well as basically what to do with the rest of the keys bosses that we didn't touch this update. And yeah, we do want to make sure that the key value matches the loot value, so we'll make sure we do that to justify those. Yeah.
All right. Another question I will pick here is related to this is related to gear. Okay, yeah. So it's not as important as others, but okay, gear such as war helmets, fishing gear, and duelists be re-added if and if it was, how would it be re-added? So like I guess like that's like the energy gear that you used to be able to get before Fifth Age came out, and then once Fifth Age came out, you like it wasn't re-added to the new blue ticket vendors. Will we see like that come back into the game anytime soon?
We could. We can go back and take a look at it. That's a question I've had before. You know, one of the things we're trying to do is just sort of quickly retire the Fourth Age tickets, but we can go back and reassess some of that stuff. It's fishing gear, I think, is one of the things that players ask for. Some of it, I think, needs to be retired because it represents Fourth Age achievement. But if it doesn't fall into that category, then there's not any particular reason that it couldn't come back for Fifth Age tickets.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess I'll do one more question. It's kind of like I think like two people kind of asked something about this. It's about like it's something about dual schooling. So it's kind of just like, how do you determine how much of that dual school? Because obviously we know that you don't take away from the main stats. The dual school stats are in addition to stats that are already on the gear. But how do you determine how much of the dual school stat to give on the gear?
Who wants to do that?
That's a tough one.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so some of it had to do with just us determining what would result in minimal viability for possibly playing one of those schools. At the same time, balancing it out such that, you know, the secondary school stats wouldn't challenge the stats of the primary school user. And so that's where we started. And again, like I mentioned before, in terms of incremental or iterative design, we presented the players with secondary stat profiles to see if they felt like it was viable, how viable it might be to play an off school. And there's a lot of different reasons that lead to a player thinking that a off school hit is or isn't worth it. And so we're looking at each of those different decision points, basically. But yeah, so we're watching and then collating feedback on what's missing, what's needed, and then we'll make adjustments with the goal in mind of meaningful choices and diversifying builds and gameplay.
All right. And is there any questions that you saw from chat that you thought are interesting to answer, or maybe we want to call it here?
I have a question for you, Ferric, that's kind of interesting.
Oh, go for it.
Bit. Basically, I just why tell everyone why are you holding on to your keys at the moment? It's kind of
okay. I will reveal my secrets, I guess. So I am holding on to these keys because something that was mentioned in I think it was like either in like a patch notes of something or something like that, was that the battle keys for currently if you go to a guild house, there is a in that battle island over there are battle gates, and right now you use those battle gates in a way where you use the raid key that you craft, and that leaves the gate open for once it's completely working and stuff. It's supposed to open it for 3 hours, and then the gate goes on cooldown for I believe like 6 days or something, and then that's like per battle gate. But right now it's mainly the raid key, but like in the future we might see the lore skeleton key bosses. Those might also be added as like craftable battle keys, and obviously I don't know what the recipe is going to be like. Maybe they don't even use gold keys. I don't know any of that for sure, but I'm currently holding on to my gold keys in hopes that that would be a thing, and basically take advantage of them so that like my guild members could basically get more value out of the gold keys that I currently have. Obviously, if that doesn't become a thing, then I'll just end up spending them like on whatever spell I feel is viable with whoever also would benefit from spells. But yeah, that's mainly why I'm holding on to keys for potentially.
That seems really, really smart. That seems like a really smart play.
It is smart, but you might be holding on to those for a while.
I would, but me personally, I don't see an immediate need for any of the lore spells right now. With at least with how I play the game, I don't really plan on doing that much PvP right now. And even if I do, I'll probably just like try to find a strategy that doesn't rely on the lore spells too much. If there is a lore spell that I feel like I really need, then maybe I can spend a few keys on that. But I've also spent, like, when I farm these keys, I farm them with people that were hoping that I would also save the keys. So,
I don't think lore spellements are going to help you either.
Yeah, probably not. Let's be honest. I've a lot to catch up on. I haven't done PvP in a while, and I wasn't very good at it when I did it. So, a lot to catch up on. But that is that. Wow, we've been here live for an hour and 50 minutes. That went way over time, but I think it was a great discussion. I want to thank each and every one of you that are watching in chat right now, and especially to the developers here. Thank you, Cam, Artie, Ratbeard, and Sparck, for all your time today. Again, we'll see you on KI Live this Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. And with that being said, I'm going to go and talk to my chat. Thank you all for all your time. And have a great rest of your day.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Bye.
Yep, thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot.